year is 2021. Khamzat Chimaev pulls out of a fight with Leon Edwards due to lingering health complications from COVID-19.
He looked incredible. Lately it's been hard to get him into the octagon. Every time he gets close to fighting, he gets really sick.
The MMA community mourned as it appeared one of the biggest prospects in the sport's history might be forced into an early retirement.
Khamzat can't even speak, His fever is so high, his headache is so much, muscle pain and everything. And then an ambulance came and got him to the hospital. And even when he was in the hospital, he called me. When he called me, he thought he was going to die.
Enter the president of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, who announced that Khamzat would in fact not be retiring from the sport after all. It was at this point that many MMA fans were first introduced to Ramzan Kadyrov, and many didn't think twice about who this man was. Their favorite fighter was finally coming back, and that's all that mattered. But for those who dug a little deeper, lay a dark story of violating women, anti-gay purges, kidnappings, assassinations, torture of human rights activists, critics, and their relatives throughout Chechnya and abroad. This is the tale of the warlord and the wolf. To truly understand the workings of Ramzan Kadyrov today, we have to understand where he comes from. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union, separatist groups in Chechnya fought for their independence from the Russian Federation. A man called Aslan Maskhadov led the resistance and became the new president of Chechnya. He was helped by Chechnya's chief mufti, Khamzat Kadyrov, Ramzan's father. After many hard-fought battles, the Russians conceded to signing a peace treaty and even to pay war damages to the Chechen state. The treaty was seen as a major cause for celebration in Chechnya, but independence from Russia would be short and quick. In August 1999, a group of Islamic terrorists carried out a bombing in Russia which killed over 300 people. Although the terrorists came from Chechnya, there was no indication that they were acting on behalf of the Chechnyan state or in the interests of its people. Although Chechnya expressed they had no part in the attack, Russia did not believe them. In 1999, Moscow nullified the peace treaty and invaded the breakaway republic yet again. It was at this time Ramzan's father, Khamzat Kadyrov, decided to switch sides and offered his support to the Russian federal forces.
قديروف خائن للأسف. طبعا إذا سألتينا لما كنا لنسمح لهذا الأمر بالحدود لشخص كقديروف بأن يمثل الشعب الشيشاني.
President Maskhadov fired him from the chief mufti chair, but the damage from the betrayal had already been done. By the next year, Russia occupied all of Chechnyan territory, rewrote the constitution, and assassinated Maskhadov in 2005 while he was negotiating to end the war. It's important to keep in mind that at the peak of this conflict, Khamzat would have just been 6 years old. As a reward for switching sides and helping Russia squash the Chechnyan resistance, Kadyrov was declared the new president of Chechnya by Vladimir Putin himself, provided he remained pro-Moscow, of course. But this would backfire, not just for Khamzat, but for all of Chechnya. This war only further radicalized the Chechen separatist movement and evolved into a pan-Islamic militant network. And just 1 year after being declared president of Chechnya, he was assassinated.
Plötzlich eine gewaltige Explosion. Bei der Ehrentribüne detoniert ein Sprengsatz. Präsident Kadyrov wird verwundet und stirbt später an den Folgen seiner Verletzungen.
Islamist Chechen rebel leader Shamil Basayev boasted that he paid $50,000 for the attack. In true democratic fashion, it was already understood that it would be Ramzan who would naturally take over the position of president from his father, and was granted leadership by Putin in 2007. Despite the region being in economic turmoil after the end of the Second Chechnya War, Kadyrov cared little for redistributing the wealth hoarded by elitist families like his own. Shortly after taking office, Kadyrov built a presidential palace on a 30-acre plot of land with his own personal prison on the premises, costing around 1.5 billion rubles. A further example of Ramzan's lavish spending was from an American diplomat who recalled Kadyrov attending his friend's wedding and giving the couple a 5-kilo lump of gold as a wedding gift, while many of his people struggled to house and feed themselves. Even more disturbing, however, were the reports of people throwing cash at the children who were being made to dance for him. And at another wedding, Kadyrov came out in support of his chief of police being betrothed to a 17-year-old girl who had been forced to marry him.
The leader of Chechnya has given his blessings to a police chief who took a 17-year-old girl as his second wife in a forced marriage.
So, where does all this money come from? According to a report by Ilya Yashin, Russia gives Chechnya over 464 billion rubles in subsidies. However, Kadyrov has been taking this money and using it for his own personal gain. In short, public funds are being funneled through the Kadyrov Foundation charity. But according to Dmitry Medvedev, federal funds often do not reach the people. We know where they disappear. It's obvious. They're being stolen. As we all know, with great wealth comes great power. And once in the top seat, those who occupy it rarely pass over the reins of control without a fight. In an attempt to grip tightly to the power he held, Kadyrov began eliminating political opponents and crushing anyone who tried to resist his Kadyrovite militia. A wide array of international organizations advocating for human rights have stated the abundance of forced disappearances, tortures, and killings.
The people who say these things stay silent about Jerusalem, where unarmed people are shot. They are silent about whole countries being destroyed, like Syria, Iraq, Libya, Egypt.
A number of Chechens who've previously stood up to Kadyrov have been assassinated. A confirmation by several witnesses confirmed the existence of a 300-name murder list, which the Chechnyan president is slowly working his way through. The Society for Threatened Peoples, GFBV, have condemned Kadyrov as a war criminal, alleging that up to 75% of recent incidents of murder, torture, rape, and kidnapping in Chechnya have been committed by Kadyrov's paramilitary forces. But don't go speaking out against any of that. The International Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights have also confirmed a number of illegal places of detention throughout Chechnya, run by Kadyrovites.
Now, those investigating serious abuses are being threatened themselves. This was an arson attack against the last human rights group still working in Chechnya.
It's not just political leaders and the families of rebels that Kadyrov wants to eradicate from the region. He wants anyone with any memory of his atrocities eliminated too. After the numerous conflicts in recent history, displaced and desperate people fled to the refugee camps. Kadyrov called for these camps scattered across Chechnya to be closed down.
Kadyrov said human rights groups are enemies. They are enemies of the people. They will not exist here.
But once power was consolidated and his position secured under the watchful eye of Putin, Ramzan began the removal of other undesirables. And in April 2017, 6 months before Khamzat's amateur debut, international media reported that gay men in Chechnya were being rounded up, detained, and tortured as a part of the region-wide homosexual purge.
Бить током, угрожать, говорить то, что они все равно это узнают. Лучше говори правду.
UK Deputy Foreign Secretary Sir Alan Duncan told the UK Parliament he had been informed of alleged plans to eliminate Chechnya's gay community by the start of Ramadan in May. But when questioned on the matter, Kadyrov initially denied the claim. But as he continues to elaborate, his rhetoric surrounding gay people rings a familiar genocidal note.
All those who defend human rights groups and the gays we supposedly have in the Chechen Republic are foreign agents. They've sold out their country, their people, their religion, everything.
У нас таких людей нету. Нету у нас геев. Если есть, заберите в Канаду. Хвала Аллаху, подальше от нас. Аузу билляхи минаш шайтанир раджим. Чтобы не было, чтобы очистили кровь, если есть таких, пусть забирают.
Further evidence of this purge came to light when a whistleblower named Maxim Lapinov gave details of his experience being detained in an anti-gay prison.
Очень жуткая была. Это вот 2 на 2 метра примерно. И 1/4 этой камеры просто залита кровью была. Вот она не вчерашняя, не позавчерашняя, но вот она прям свежая, только впитавшаяся в доски.
Lapanov was originally from Serbia and came to Chechnya for business in 2015. As a foreigner, he felt safe being openly gay, not fearing for any repercussions. However, in 2017, he was arrested and thrown into a blood-soaked cellar and repeatedly beaten for nearly 2 weeks until he signed a confession confirming his homosexuality and promising to never speak of his time in prison.
Я уже падал на ноги, потому что на ногах стоять не мог. У меня отбиты были ноги, бедра, ягодицы, спина. То есть, опять же, давали отдышаться, заставляли встать. И снова начинали бить с угрозами, обвинениями, крики. Они по всему подвалу были слышны, и они жуткие были. Я предполагаю, что в один из дней кого-то били током, потому что там вот человек, взрослый мужик, с таким грубым голосом, он прям визжал.
Obviously, Maxim didn't adhere to the latter part of his punishment and became the first witness to go public. However, human rights activists say they don't expect ethnic Chechens to follow Mr. Lapanov's lead. As a Serbian, Maxim had no family in Chechnya to be threatened and was probably only arrested in the first place because he was mistaken for a native of the region. It's suspected that over 100 gay men have been detained in such a manner, and the Washington Post has confirmed that honor killings have been taking place, in which Kadyrov has publicly supported.
But the abuses that we've heard about are extremely serious, and they still continue.
But what does all of this have to do with MMA? Among the many facets of his public persona, Kadyrov's interest in mixed martial arts stands out as not merely a hobby, but as a disturbing reflection of his regime's use of sport for political and propagandistic purposes. Kadyrov's involvement in MMA goes far beyond mere fandom. He established the Akhmat MMA Fight Club, named after his father, Akhmat Kadyrov, and has aggressively promoted the sport within Chechnya. The club has attracted several high-profile fighters, often lured by lucrative contracts and the promise of state-of-the-art training facilities. In 2016, Kadyrov televised an MMA event featuring young boys, some of which as young as 8, which sparked outrage when videos emerged of them engaging in full-contact fights. This exploitation of children for public spectacle underscores a broader pattern of using MMA to reinforce an image of Chechnya as some modern-day Sparta. Fedor Emelianenko famously spoke out against such competitions on social media.
Such a powerful statement condemning the fight, which, mind you, has since been deleted. We'll get into that later.
Before his daughter was violently attacked in what's expected to be retaliation for his statements.
Fedor's daughter was, his middle daughter, 16 years old, was on her way to school in Moscow when an unidentified assailant stepped out of nowhere and basically kicked her in the chest, and she had to be hospitalized.
Moreover, Kadyrov's patronage of MMA serves as a means of asserting his power and control. Fighters associated with Akhmat MMA often become symbolic enforcers of his regime, with their victories in the ring paralleling Kadyrov's narrative of strength and dominance. Enter the Wolf. The fighter who has undoubtedly caught the most attention from Kadyrov is UFC middleweight and Chechnya-born native Khamzat Chimaev.
I want to fight only, fight. I love the fight. I want to fight, smash somebody, take money. I'm in the UFC, brother. I'm gonna take the both belts.
Famed for his aggressive style and personality.
Everybody, I come here for everybody. Kill everybody. I'm the champ, I'm the king, kill everyone.
Chimaev encapsulates everything Kadyrov wants you to believe about Chechnya. That it's a place of hypermasculine paradise that breeds the most fearsome fighters in the world. And on the surface, Khamzat appears all too willing to go along with this, regularly seen embracing Ramzan and receiving lavish gifts from him. He also helps out with state propaganda. Footage was released of Kadyrov and his sons beating him up in sparring. Whether the implication is that Ramzan and his teenage children can beat up a top-ranked UFC contender, or that he simply trains them to become great fighters, they must be a family to be feared and respected. While on the topic of inflating his family's fighting prowess, many clips can be found of Kadyrov's sons taking part in rigged competitions, with early referee stoppages. And it appears the two are very close. Chimaev will sometimes corner Ramzan's kids when they compete, and Kadyrov even attended Khamzat's wedding. Despite all of this, things might not be so clear-cut.
And Chechnya is totally different when you grow up in the war.
Yeah, it was everywhere military, like come to your house and check your house and everything.
A lot of people talk about I am from the ghetto, I am from this and that. It's not the same thing.
Khamzat left a war-torn Chechnya for a better life in Sweden. But when he blew up in popularity, he suddenly found himself as the dictator's tool of choice for propaganda. It's not a lack of awareness of the darkest depths of what Kadyrov is willing to do that makes Chimaev so compliant, but the fact that he knows full well what happens to political opponents. Notice how the typical mix of intensity with a pinch of jovialness seems to have left Khamzat's demeanor when asked about the human rights violation of his friend.
Vill du avbryta intervjun?
Vadå?
Vill du avbryta intervjun? Tack så mycket för intervjun.
We also know that both the wars in Ukraine and Palestine are conflicts that Khamzat genuinely feels passionate about coming to an end. Yet, Kadyrov continues to play an active role in helping Russia's efforts to take more and more Ukrainian territory, which must surely pain Chimaev.
Чеченской Республики мы выполняем все ваши приказы и нацелены действовать до победного конца. Жители региона полностью поддерживают проведение СВО и считают необходимым достижение ее цели и задач.
And let's not forget what happened to Abdul Karim Adilov, another previous favorite of Kadyrov, who fought in the UFC. Although Adilov had beaten a young Yuri Prochazka, his record was padded with many less reputable fighters. He had one fight in the UFC, and then was immediately retired to fight more cans in boxing, as it appears he was being used as more of a poster boy for combat sport in Chechnya than trying to contend for a real title. He was then made Deputy Prime Minister of Chechnya, but fell out with Kadyrov and retired from his government. Karim Adilov was found dead just weeks later. When fully understanding the scope of what might be at stake for Chimaev, we must be careful not to spring to judgment. The same cannot be said, however, for those who flock to carry water for a man who's killed countless innocent people, who seem so awestruck by the shiny trinkets dangled in front of them, that they fail to see the atrocities just off in their periphery.
Chechnya, yeah. And the guy is like a murderer, basically, the top dog.
Yeah, I think he's
like best friends with Putin.
Yeah.
He's like not a good person. And that's who they went there to his kid's birthday party.
Internationally, Kadyrov's association with MMA has led to strained relations with various sports organizations. Fighters and promoters are often caught in a moral dilemma, meaning fighters like Khamzat are extremely limited in the countries they're allowed to compete in. Along with his health complications, many have theorized that Kadyrov's relationship with Chimaev could be the reason for the new star's recent inactivity. Regardless, it seems unlikely that Khamzat would choose for this to be how his life plays out, now confined to the borders of the UAE, and with every move dictated to him by an unstable warlord.
So see you soon is like, where? You can't get into any country.
But that doesn't mean everyone back home in Chechnya has a sympathetic ear for Khamzat. There are still those who remember the betrayal that Kadyrov's father made to those fighting for independence from Russia, and they don't look favorably upon Khamzat doing his descendants' bidding. The Chechen opposition recently claimed that Kadyrov had been admitted to the hospital after his health deteriorated while recovering from kidney failure. But in classic Kadyrov fashion, he released videos of himself pulling cars in an over-the-top demonstration to prove his vitality. But it appears the lady doth protest too much, as The Guardian stated that despite insisting that he was in good health, Kadyrov's public appearances showed him with a swollen face, slurred speech, and keeping awake with much difficulty. The sudden passing of dictators from ill health is regularly romanticized by those who wish to see their regimes end. But when one tyrant dies, without structural change, another takes his place. The Kadyrov dynasty will likely continue through his sons, and with Putin keeping a watchful eye. One of the most troubling aspects of Kadyrov's MMA involvement is his use of the sport as a tool for state propaganda. This facade masks the underlying issues of severe human rights violations, including reports of extrajudicial killings, torture, and the persecution of LGBTQ individuals. Ramzan Kadyrov's interest in MMA is far more than a personal pastime. It's a strategic extension of his authoritarian rule. By intertwining sports with state propaganda, Kadyrov not only bolsters his regime's image, but also perpetuates a culture of violence and control that has dire implications for human rights in Chechnya. One can hope that the MMA community will remain vigilant and critical of any association that legitimizes or overlooks the disturbing realities behind Kadyrov's MMA endeavors. But will it?